my sweater has jingle bells on it, so if you hear jingling during this video, it's because I'm extra. Hello book friends, welcome to Books and Tea Time. I'm Addie. I'm in the holiday spirit. I have a sweater that jingles and has obnoxious sparkly pom-poms. I put green eyeshadow on today. My nails are sparkly red and green. Today's video is going to be my best and worst books of 2021. So I filmed this video last year, and the way that I like to do this is I pick 5 of my favorites and 5 of like my disappointments, books I did not like, did not care for, and I talk through them with you all in this video. We're gonna go through all of my 5 stars that didn't make the list, that are like my honorable mentions category, and we're just going to talk about the best of the best and the poop of 2021. So let's start with the crap, shall we? Honestly, after my wrap up and a couple of my vlogs, I don't think anybody's gonna be surprised by these books, okay? I just want to get the bad stuff out of the way so that we can move on to the stuff that I recommend, to the stuff that I'm gonna reread probably in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, because it's so freaking good. I'm gonna go in ascending order. So number 5 was probably the least crappy, but I still really didn't like it, and that is Some Kind of Fairy Tale by an author whose name I cannot remember. So Some Kind of Fairy Tale by X person is not a bad book. I think it's just poorly marketed, because like the back of the book and like all of the synopses that I read, it markets this as like a mystery / psychological thriller where this girl goes missing, I think for like 16 years, and she shows up on her family's doorstep exactly 16 years later, I think, or like after a period of time, and acts as though no time has passed. And she still looks really young, and she claims that she was abducted by fairies. So what I was expecting was going into this and like having an unreliable narrator, or like some kind of situation where the whole book you're going back and forth between whether or not she's crazy or whether or not like fairies are actually real and she was abducted, whether her family is like, there's like a psychological element to it, and then that there was like the mystery element to it. And I mean, like, I can get on board with a book having an ambiguous ending or like not telling you, but this book was just kind of lackluster, honestly. I wish we got more time with the girl and like more time in her head. There are scenes where she's like telling people in her life what happened to her and like telling them the stories of like getting abducted and being stuck there and what it was like living with these fairies, but like I really didn't love the ending. I'm like lukewarm about this one. I think I gave it like a 3-ish star or something like that. I'm not exactly sure of my rating, but like it was okay, it was fine, it wasn't very memorable. I don't remember any of the characters' names. I don't remember a lot of what happens. I vaguely remember the ending, and I know why I didn't really prefer it. And I know that the whole time I was waiting for like the other shoe to drop in this psychological thriller or this mystery, and like for the pace to pick up and something to happen, whether or not that was like an ambiguous thing or like some big plot twist, but like nothing ever really happens. It kind of keeps the same pace and the same vibe throughout, and I was expecting or hoping for it to change, and it doesn't. So that's that. Number 4 on the 5 worst books of the year is White Noise by Dawn DeLillo. Full transparency, I had to read this for school. So like this is one of those situations where usually 1 in like every 5 books that I read for school just does not, it's not my jam. I did not like it, and this was that book for me. So I had to read this for a class on postmodernism. I don't recommend it. Snoozeville, 400, 350 some pages of just like, nah, blah, blah. I don't know. And it's kind of just commentary on like the American family and consumerism and American society. I cannot remember the time period. I want to say it's the 60s. I understand why we read it, and I enjoyed discussing it, but I did not enjoy the book. And if you don't have to read this for school, unless you love postmodernism, do not read this book. It is a waste of your time, I promise. Okay, coming in at number 3, I just talked about this book in my fall wrap-up, so I am not going to repeat myself too much because, let's be honest, no one wants to hear me rant about these books 2-3 times. But A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. This was such a huge disappointment. I was expecting this to be really good because I had heard so many people raving about it and how good it was and how everybody loved it, and like it's a great Beauty and the Beast retelling and it's an urban fantasy Beauty and the Beast YA book, and it's just YA trash. I hated the writing. It was super corny and cringy and cheesy. The not like other girls trope is so dominant in this. Like, Harper is the not like other girls trope in a nutshell. It's really annoying. There's no chemistry between her and Ren. There's like a failed love triangle, and it just overall was not at all what I wanted, not at all what I expected, and it was poop. And I do not recommend it. I don't know what other people are talking about, okay? Unless you really, really like corny, angsty YA, I don't think you're gonna like this book, okay? And maybe I am just spoiled by fantasy and like epic fantasy and adult fantasy, but like I really don't think that's it, because I have plenty of urban fantasy and YA fantasies that I love. For example, I'm just gonna pull it off the shelf. A Blade So Black by Ella McKinney. This is an urban fantasy. It's an Alice in Wonderland retelling, and it's a YA fantasy, and it's great. It's so well written. It's funny. The way that they mix the urban fantasy with the fantastical world is really cool. Ella McKinney does a great job with this. So I don't think it's that I'm just like, I can't read YA fantasy. I think it's just that A Curse So Dark and Lonely is bad. And that's my piece. I've said it. Now let's move on to number 2. The second worst book that I read this year was 650 pages of plain bad heroines. It is like 200 to 300 pages too long. Again, the writing is just not my forte. The way that like everything is written, it pulls you out of the narrative so often and makes you question, why am I reading this book? The present plotline makes no sense. I really hated all of the characters in the present. There's a timeline in the past that I did like, I didn't love. I don't even know what this book is, okay? It's like kind of supposed to be a mystery, kind of supposed to be horror, kind of fantastical, depending on how you read it. But overall, it's just plain poop. Such a long book, and I feel like you don't really get any positive things out of it. There's like so many subplots that like don't really line up with the main plot threads and like just zoom in everywhere. It's like this book is trying to be 6 different books at one time and like presenting it as an aesthetic choice when really she just needs to write a couple different books, okay? They're all different. They don't go together. There's no matching. There's no cohesion. And there's no interesting plot that happens. I'm angry. Number 1, the worst book that I read this year is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. This was also the first book that I read this year, so I really did not start on a strong note. This is another book, first of all, that is way too long. I think this is like 800 pages, and it needed to be like 400 to 500. There are so many sequences of plot that are boring as hell and unnecessary. Like, there are actual sequences where our character is just like sleeping or like in space hibernation. This is a science fiction book that is like a space opera kind of a thing. Our main character like contacts this alien artifact, and then like it morphs around her in this like suit that becomes part of her. It was fine, but it was so long, and it was really disappointing because I have heard that Christopher Paolini is a really good writer because he wrote Aragon, and this is his first adult book, so maybe it's just been a while. He hasn't written in like several years. I want to say like a decade or something. Maybe sci-fi is not his genre, but this was so overwritten and unedited. The plot was not even that interesting. Please don't hate me if you like any of these books. You're allowed to like them. You know, our tastes might just be different. Let's just move on. The worst books are out of the way, and now we can get to the good stuff. As I said, first we are going to go through my honorable mentions list. So I have all of the 5 stars that I gave this year, and all of these books could easily be in these top 5 category spots, but for very, very little minor reasons did not make it to that top spot, you know? So any of these could be on this best of the best list, but I'm just going to quickly read through to you the honorable mentions of 2021, all of my 5 stars that I gave. First and foremost, I reread The Golden Compass for the 3rd time for class, and I obviously gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Next, If on a Winter's Night, A Traveler by Italo Calvino. This was the best book that I read for school in the spring semester. It is a book for readers who love reading. 5 out of 5. Conjure Women by Afia Adekora. Absolutely love that book. Beautifully written. The Lesson by Cadwell Turnbull. This is a good sci-fi book. If you want a good sci-fi book, read this instead. Then I read Get a Life Chloe Brown and Take a Hint Danny Brown and Act Your Age Eve Brown. All of them 5 out of 5 stars. Danny Brown almost made the list. It literally missed out by like the tiniest thing. I had it in my top 5 and then I just like scooched it and bumped it down for this other book, but like literally Danny Brown is perfection. I love that book so much. I love all of the books in the Brown Sister trilogy. 5 out of 5 stars. After that, The Empress of Salt and Fortune and When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nevo, both novellas, both beautiful, lyrical, enchanting writing. Then I read Milk Fed by Melissa Broder, I think. Then I read Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. Excellent nonfiction book and excellent thing to read if you're wanting to improve and expand your feminist practice beyond mainstream white feminism. Next, Oathbringer. Are we surprised? No. Then The Mistletoe Motive by Chloe Lees. This is a Christmas novella that I read. Absolutely loved. Perfection. And I reread The Hating Game and gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Those are the honorable mentions. Now let's get into my favorite books of the year. So these are kind of in an organized list. Honestly, the number 1 and the number 2 slot are basically tied for best book of the year, but the 3, 4, and 5 are kind of definitive, so we're gonna go through those first. So coming in at number 5 is The Girl and the Goddess, Poems and Stories of Divine Wisdom by Nikita Gill. Okay, I read this book as a library book, and I only own 2 out of these 5 books, and I need to get them ASAP. Like, if I don't get them for Christmas from Santa, wink wink, then I am going to buy them for myself because I need to reread and annotate all 5 of these books. That's how much I absolutely adored them. They are so good and perfection. So this is a collection of poems and very short stories and beautiful, beautiful illustrations, and it just chronicles the life of a young girl. So this follows our main character, Paro. It's kind of a coming of age story that's told in these different poems. There's 3 sections, one from her childhood, one from like girlhood, adolescence, and then one that is adulthood. And we are following this main character, and we're following her as she lives in India during partition and dealing with that and all of her personal change and personal growth. And there's also this beautiful undercurrent of Hindu mythology that's included, and like that connection with divinity and spirituality. It just blew me away. It was so beautiful. There were poems that I connected with personally that really made me form a bond with Paro as a main character. It was cool reading fictional poetry, if that makes sense, or like a longer story told in poems. Like, I don't think I've ever really read anything like that before, and I thought that it was beautiful the way that it weaves the story together. It's so like seamless and elegant and natural. There are a lot of content warnings, but there's an included page at the beginning that lists all those content warnings. So if you see it in a library or in a bookstore, just make sure that you like leaf through that and read it. I read this for my Mythological Babes reading vlog, so if you want to see some of the illustrations, I took some video of them, and I think I actually read 1 or 2 of the poems in that vlog as well, like one or two of my favorites. So I'll have a card to that if you want to hear even more about this book. This book is like, it makes me so happy that I'm a reader. You know what I mean? Like books like that just like you connect with emotionally, and like, oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Moving on to number 4. Okay, I predicted that this was going to be my best book of the year. It does have a lot of competition, but it's on the list. I talked about it in my spring wrap up, and it is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Oh my god. I gushed about this book, I think, for like 15 minutes in my spring wrap up. So again, I'll have a card to that, but this is obviously one of the most popular and endearing and amazing romances of all time. If you like romance and you haven't read this book, go read it right now. If you don't like romance and you haven't read this book, go read it right now. I promise you, you will love it. It's hilarious. Henry is my new fictional BFF. I want to be his best friend, okay? I love everything about him. Like, I can't wait to annotate this book and just highlight in one color all of the things that Henry and I have in common and would make us best friends forever, because I love him as a person, as an individual. I love Alex as an individual too. So sweet, and like, I love how driven he is, and like his optimism, but also his like headstrong attitude and his approach to politics. This is a love story between the son of the President of the United States, who is a female. We love to see it. And the son of one of the heirs to the throne in England. And so like there's like some political undercurrents, but it's not too heavy on the politics. And they fall in love, and it's so cute and sweet. There are steamy moments. There are moments that will make you cry. I cried when I read this book. But there's also like this wholesome part to it at the end that just makes you so happy to be alive. It gives you hope for the world. It gives you hope for life, for love, for everything. And I can't wait to reread it in the physical. I listened to the audio the first time around, and the audio is really good. Don't get me wrong, I loved the audio, but I need the physical book right now. I knew that it was going to be on my favorites list the second that I finished it. 5 out of 5 stars. Perfection. After that is another romance. That's right, folks. 2 romances on my best of 2021, because I read more romances this year than I read any other genre, including fantasy. I don't know what happened to me. Number 3, the third best book that I read this year, is Only When It's Us by Chloe Lees. This book made me bawl my eyes out. It's so good. This is a romance series by Chloe Lees, and this is the first book in the Bergman Brothers series. And there are 4 books out, but I think there are going to be 7 total. This is the first one, and I love all of them individually for their own reason, but Only When It's Us is definitely my favorite. And it made me cry. So as soon as I started crying, I knew this book is going to be a 5 out of 5 stars. It's very emotional, but it's also so sweet, so funny, so steamy. There's great representation. Both of our main characters are in college, so it's a college sports romance, but it's also so much more than that. And I don't want to just call it a sports romance, because like there's mention of soccer, and our main character Willa plays soccer on the college team, and she wants to play professionally, but it's not like so heavy with the sports romance that I think if you don't like soccer, or if you don't know a lot about sports, that you'll be confused or lost in any way. Some of the content warnings, death of a loved one, and like cancer or illness, like terminal illness, is a big part of the heavy hitting moments in this book. I'm never going to stop talking about this series, so get used to it. That's all I have to say. These last 2 books, as I said, are basically tied for number 1 spot. Like, I can't decide. And they are the only 2 books that I have in the physical. And I'm looking at them right now, and I cannot decide which one it is. I can't decide. If I had to choose right now, or like fall off of a cliff, I would have to fall off of a cliff, because like they're both so good. Okay, pause the video, comment down below, what is your guess for my top book of 2021? And if you're right, you get a gold star. I'm going to show them to you at the same time. The best books of 2021 are Words of Radiance and The Witch's Heart. Let's do this one first, because are we surprised? Absolutely not. Okay, Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 2nd book in the Stormlight Archive. I mean, look at these tabs, guys. Like, what? Best fantasy that I've read in probably ever. The only thing that ever would hold a candle to it is the Rhaenyra Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan, which is my favorite fantasy series. I love this series, but this book is just absolute perfection from beginning to end. Every sentence in this book is amazing. It's perfection. It builds on the world, builds on the characters. It's entertaining. There's so much action. There's so much character development. There are funny parts. There are emotional parts. And one of my favorite characters, we get her backstory in this book. The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson is an absolute masterpiece. And The Way of Kings, I think I gave a 4.5. And Oathbringer, I also gave a 5. But this is my favorite book in the series, so I had to give it a spot on this top 5 list. I couldn't not include it, but I have a feeling that Rhythm of War might dethrone this one as my favorite when I do read it. But as of right now, as of the end of 2021, this book is amazing. Can't recommend it enough. I just talked about this in my fall wrap-up, and I do spoiler reading vlogs for all of the Stormlight books, so I'll have a card to that playlist and a link to it in the description box if you've read the series and you want my spoilery reactions to this book and the other two in the series. And then The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. This is a Norse mythology inspired like retelling, sort of, and also just sort of like new take on Norse mythology. This follows Angrboda. She is an incredibly powerful witch in Norse mythology, and she basically has access to the future and knowledge of the future, and Odin demands that she tell him that future, and when she doesn't, he burns her at the stake and kills her. But Angrboda keeps coming back to life. She's been burnt at the stake, I think like 2 or 3 times. So at the beginning of this book, she kind of goes into hiding from Odin, and she falls in love with Loki, and they have 3 children who are also really, really popular and big figures in Norse mythology. But I won't say anything, because if you haven't read this book or if you aren't super familiar with Norse mythology, I don't want to spoil it for you, because it is kind of like exciting, because I didn't know Angrboda was the mother of these 3 characters in these 3 deities in Norse mythology until I read this. And I didn't know Loki was their father either, but I knew of all of them. So that was really amazing and cool to read. And then also one of my favorite deities, one of my favorite figures in Norse mythology, Skadi, is in this book. There is just so much to love about this book. The writing is gorgeous. It is the most beautiful and enchanting lyrical writing while also still being funny. I was very, very impressed by how like casual and relaxed and funny Loki and Angrboda and their dialogue is, but also still being so beautiful and well written. And the friendship between Skadi and Angrboda is so good. Oh my god, I love this book so much. Also, the ending is one of the best endings that I have ever read to any book, let alone a book like this, where like you kind of know there's like a set plot, right? Like it's like when you have a retelling of like the Song of Achilles or something like that. Like when you have a retelling of the Trojan War, you kind of know what happens in the Trojan War. So it's very interesting to see the choices that authors make to tell it and retell it in their own way that adds changes but doesn't change the source text so much that it is unrealistic, or not even unrealistic, but like I think it's very, very well done. I'll say that. I loved it so much. It was one of the most enjoyable reading experiences I've had in a very long time, and it's an excellent mythological retelling. I think that if you like Circe, you would really like this book. It has similar vibes, definitely different plot and different pantheons, but for the most part, the vibe is very, very similar, and Angrboda is amazing. She's so fun to read from. I don't care what genre you normally read from. If you're willing to try any of these books, I really, really think that you will like them. I do. It's awesome. Although don't read Words of Radiance first, because that's the second book in a series. But all the rest of them, you can just dive right in right now, head first, go for it. So those are my best and worst books of 2021. We had some crap, but for the most part, I read some really, really amazing books this year. Putting my top 5 together, again, like I said, is really hard. If I'm a Learner's End, A Traveler by Italo Calvino almost made it. Take a Hint, Danny Brown almost made it. I think I read like 82 or 83 books. Let me know down below one best and one worst book that you read this year. I want to know the best and of the best and the worst of the worst in your opinion. And we'll talk about it. We'll chat about it. Thanks so much for watching this video and coming to my channel. It really means the world to me. I love you guys all so much. You're the best. I love books and talking about books, and I'm just, I'm so happy. I'm just a happy little book lover right now, okay? Everybody have a good one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if that's your jam, and I hope to see you in my next video. Happy reading, happy writing, and happy living. Peace out.